wait, they can hear me. You had to unmute to mute my microphone because I kept talking over the. I'm sorry, that was my fault. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Founding Feckheads. In this sub podcast of the Jib, you'll notice a little bit different today. We look at the dark side of the founding fathers of the United States. Our first founding feckhead was George Washington. Then we did John Adams. Then we did Thomas Jefferson. Then we did James Madison. And our fifth founding feckhead is James Monroe. And I think it's fair to say that James Monroe might be the first founding feckhead we've done that if you're not American, you may not even have heard of this guy.
James Monroe, the fifth president of the United States, is often
loud.
Way too loud?
No, it's fine.
I purposely start talking louder. Okay. He's the fifth president of the United States, asshole. He is often celebrated for presiding over the so-called era of good feeling, which is just a total bullshit term, right?
Yep.
We had a bit of that with the vibes and joy recently. But anyways, his face is cast in bronze as a founding father, soldier, diplomat, and statesman. Like many of our previous feckheads, Monroe's legacy is far darker than your high school history teacher would have led you to believe. He was born, believe it or not, on April 28th, 1758 in Westmoreland County, Virginia. Monroe came from a planter background steeped in slavery. Yes, the tradition continues. He studied at the College of William and Mary, which apparently for stealing Dan did not do, but was okay for James, and it left him to join the Continental Army in 1776, where he fought at Trenton in Monmouth. After the Revolution, like many Virginia elites, he turned to plantation life, purchasing enslaved folks and profiting from their forced labor. Even in his early career as a U.S. Senator, which he was from 1790 to 1794, Monroe was not exactly a radical Democrat. He aligned with Thomas Jefferson's agrarian Republican faction, but his defense of the yeoman farmer was always underwritten by enslaved labor and land theft from indigenous folks.
Yeah. I should probably say that as part of our technical difficulties, there is a delay of about 3 or 4 seconds between Seamus and myself, which means it's like making a call to the moon, and we have to just wait for a little while for the text to go through. So when I make my snappy little rejoinders, Seamus will already have been moved on to the next sentence. So no worries. Here we go.
Bummer.
Just like that. As governor of Virginia, Monroe presided over one of the darkest chapters of early American slavery, the Gabriel's Rebellion of 1800. Gabriel, an enslaved blacksmith, planned a massive slave uprising in Richmond. The rebellion was betrayed and dozens of enslaved people were executed. In other words, the uprising never happened. Monroe personally oversaw the trials. In fairness to Jimmy Monroe, apparently we're calling him now, part of Gabriel's plan was to take the governor hostage, so they may have been a bit more invested by this. He refused clemency for most, sending a clear message that Virginia's planter class would crush any bid for freedom. Monroe wrote of the rebellion that the execution of the laws must be inflicted with severity, revealing his loyalty not to liberty but to slaveholders and slaveholding order. Monroe's career as a diplomat also advanced slavery in the empire. As minister to France in 1803, he helped negotiate the Louisiana Purchase with Jefferson. We have a photo of the Louisiana Purchase, I believe, do we? And that is the Louisiana Purchase, right? Now, before that, everything to the east of that was kind of like the orange bits were America, and the rest was kind of bandit country. And everything orange and green and yellow in that was not really American at all. It just wasn't America. It's hard to think about it right now. But it was just either Indian land or run by Spain, which means nothing was happening there at all. Like Spain had no control over those places, so it was like bandit country again. So when he bought that whole place, that's what was happening. While celebrated as a land deal, the purchase doubled the U.S. land base at the expense of indigenous people, as you can clearly see. It also created vast new territory for the expansion of slavery, intensifying sectional conflict for decades. And as you would see, this would cause all sorts of fights. In 1811, as a member of Madison's cabinet, Monroe supported the violent suppression of Tecumseh's Confederacy during the Battle of Tippecanoe. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, 6 seconds, folks, don't worry about it. His government refused to recognize native sovereignty, casting indigenous resistance as, quote, savage hostility to, quote, civilization. The Monroe presidency is closely associated with what was known as the era of good feelings, and that is literally what they called it. We're not making that up. A brief stretch of peace and prosperity enjoyed by the Americans after winning the War of 1812. It wasn't very peaceful or prosperous for the Federalists, though. When it was suggested that Monroe include a Federalist in his cabinet to promote national unity, he refused. He denied the Federalists access to federal funding, ironically, and administrative appointments, and did everything he could to eliminate the party without actually doing anything, meaning he didn't actively do anything, but he was happy enough to let it die on the vine. To underline his contempt for the Federalists, he made his Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, who had defected from the Federalists before the War of 1812. His public justification for this approach was to eliminate the party system altogether, instead promoting individuals who were most qualified to relevant positions. It's not clear if he expected the parliamentary republic to function as a series of unconnected individuals, but that has never happened anywhere. In any case, in practice, the main upshot was an almost monopoly on power by the Democrat-Republican Party, which, just to remind you all, was one party now called Democratic-Republican. That's just what they called it. Monroe's strategy was short-lived, as by the end of the 1820s, a new party system emerged between the Democrats, the Whigs, and some smaller parties, which must have been bubbling under the surface of Monroe's presidency the whole time. The thing about this is it's a very libertarian idea that we're all just unconnected individuals, and if you leave us all alone, we'll be fine. Well, that's absolute bullshit. No society since the dawn of mankind has ever operated like that, and it's also think about, as Bill Maher said, well, you know, who we all hate, but he did say this is why we don't. This is why we don't bring our own roads when we're going to town, because we live in a society where there's a collective responsibility
Yeah.
and a collective duty. And unless these libertarians want to often live in an island somewhere and shoot their food with guns that they have made themselves from steel that they have dug out of the ground themselves, they can. They're just. It's just bullshit. And now back to you in the studio.
All right. Time to talk about the Missouri Compromise.
Ugh.
Another group, uh, yeah, another group who may have not been having good feelings were the slaves. Sorry to laugh, but that's ironic. When Missouri applied for statehood in 1817, it would tip the balance of the U.S. States in favor of slave states. For the nations. Northern Republicans were becoming increasingly squeamish about the entire concept of slavery, but felt that enlightenment by Congress would destroy the Union. As such attempts were made at the compromise, James Talmadge Jr. Proposed the following amendment to the statehood bill. Provide the further introduction of slavery or involuntary servitude be prohibited, except for the punishment of crimes whatsoever the party shall have been fully convicted, and that all child born within that state after admission therefore into the Union shall be free at the age of 25 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. The southern states who had previously aggressively defended federal protection of slavery now switched up completely and decided it was unconstitutional for federal government to have any say how a state handles its affairs. Boy, that still pans out today, I tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was the start of a proud tradition of the right wing conservatives who couldn't get their way, suddenly promoting states' rights. Just when it looked like Congress would be struck forever in total deadlock, Maine applied for statehood. If admitted together, it would not upset the balance of slave states for free states. The bill also established the 36-degree and 30 accrements parallel as the limit of any further slavery business in the entire Louisiana territory.
Okay, we have a map of
After
that.
much fighting and much work, yes, we do. The map.
Map. Map. That is the line, the green line
There's some
there.
map.
And
Uh,
3630 means
yep.
no further slavery is allowed to happen above that line.
After much fighting and much work by the Speaker of the House, Henry Clay, what a great guy he was, the compromise passed. At this time, it was seen as a success, a pragmatic and diplomatic solution to inflexible tensions around the political issue of slavery. In reality, for the first time, the States had been geographically divided by law around sectarian lines. It perpetuated the institution of slavery indefinitely. It was a cosmetic response to serious divisions between slavery state and free states, which were eventually run into a civil war. The fact that James Monroe himself owned many slaves may have influenced his soft approach and
Yeah.
his reluctance to sign the bill,
I should,
which
we
he
should
did eventually
Yeah,
sign.
I should explain to everybody that for the last two paragraphs, I've written all those sentences, and we didn't know who'd be reading them out at the time, and so those sentences are very, very long. Okay, I write very long sentences. It's just part of my thing. It's my style. And poor Seamus is, I mean, I'm sorry, man.
Oh no, that's all good. Yeah, the thing I meant to add this when we threw it together is that how much John Quincy was against this. He basically thought
Line.
that Monroe's was a hypocrite
Yeah, he
for it.
is.
So yeah, but yeah. Anywho, Monroe supported. Yep. Monroe supported the American Colonization Society, which is called the ACS, which sought to deport free African Americans to Africa. The ACS, founded in 1816 by elite politicians and slaveholders, claimed to be a philanthropic, but it was in fact designed to protect slavery from by removing free black communities that might inspire rebellion.
Correct.
Monroe himself helped fund the founding of Liberia, where the capital, Monrovia, was named after him. Which, by the way, this idea, this whole Liberia thing, was Lincoln's first choice and the choice that he really wanted instead
Yep.
of the proclamation that
They all
he
thought it was a
eventually
great
did. But,
idea. Yeah.
anyways, yep. Instead of confronting slavery at home, Monroe pushed blacks into forced exile abroad. Abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison condemned colonization as racist and fraudulent. Frederick Douglass, the badass that he was, later wrote that the scheme was an inhuman mockery of injustice, exposing Monroe's project as another mechanism of white supremacy.
Yeah, fair enough. Like, it was a fucking joke. Dragging these people without their consent and against their will into forced labor and then saying, oh, yeah, by the way, you can fuck off back home. It's disgusting. It's
Yep.
disgusting. Anyway, another group who were not
Yep.
experiencing many
Ain't
good.
that America? You and me.
Yeah, and I'm proud of the American, I'm free. Um, Another group who were not experiencing many good feelings during the era of good feelings during the Monroe presidency were the Seminole Indians of Spanish Florida, as it was known at the time. These Indians had been running low-level raids on American
Mm.
settlements and the greater sin of harboring runaway slaves. Dun, dun, dun. Slave owners were repeatedly raiding Seminole settlements to take back what they regarded as their property, meaning people. Spain had completely lost control of all its American colonies at this point, so it was left to Monroe to do something. He ordered Andrew Jackson, our old friend from the last founding Feckheads, to defend the American settlements and attack the Seminoles, but leave the underpowered Spanish military outposts alone. Do not go near the Spaniards. He was given very clear orders. Jackson proceeded to take the Spanish fort of San Marcos and occupy the Spanish city of Pensacola, which is now perhaps more famous for being the birthplace of Joe Scarborough, or the annual New Year's Eve Pelican Drop. Monroe was unhappy that Jackson disobeyed his clear instructions, but was happy enough to take advantage of the new leverage against the Spanish that occupying their territory gave him. In 1890, that's called realpolitik, kids. Whenever you hear the word realpolitik, someone's getting fucked. In 1819, Spain and the United States negotiated the Adams-Onis Treaty. The Adams was John Quincy Adams, who went on to be the president, as you're probably all aware. Regular viewers of our podcast, hey everybody, regular viewers of our podcast will be familiar with high-level talks about what's going to happen somewhere without consulting any of the people living there. The treaty recognized American
Mm-hmm.
control of Florida in exchange for Spanish control of Texas. It was all very much more complicated than that, but I'm summarizing it in that one sentence because I like you all and we're not going to be here all day. This was the beginning of the end for the Seminoles and every American native tribe in Florida, and I guess everywhere else, but we're talking about Florida here. They had existed in the twilight world of a dying empire, meaning the Spanish Empire, and now they were shoved into the full metal jacket of the United States. In 1823, the tribe signed the Treaty of Moultrie Creek with the government to willingly relocate themselves, and I should have put that in ironic quotes, to willingly relocate themselves to a reservation in the middle of Florida. Part of the treaty bound the Indians to return any runaway slaves who escaped onto the reservation.
Yay.
Yay.
So now we're on to the Panic of 1819. The era of good feeling hit something of a brick wall with the Panic of 1819, the first major financial crisis in U.S. history. Don't worry, we'll get used to it. We keep doing this. 20 years. Yay, capitalism.
Yay, capitalism.
Even before the Monroe presidency, the American economy was running under what Henry Clay, its chief proponent, called the American system. This mostly involved a network of high tariffs, high public land prices, a strong national bank, and a program of national infrastructure. After the Napoleonic Wars, the Western world would itself in economic turmoil due to the manufacturing and agricultural industries across Europe designed to free a war machine suddenly forced to adapt to
Sorry about my sentence.
Yeah. Oh, it's all good. In America, markets were flooded with cheap English goods, while the National Bank were forced to buy gold and silver to back up the currency from London markets at an inflated rate. Real pressure came when, in an effort to expand the Union west and south, the government sold public land for $2 per acre, which is a steal.
Yeah.
Probably not back then,
Like
but hey,
literally
land sales went through the roof. Yeah, went through the roof with a bank loans which were unsecured by any collateral except itself. Public land stood to 17 million in 1818. That's back when 17 million was a lot of money.
Hey.
In 1818, August 1818, the Second Bank of America made the cardinal error of calling in its debts and held its states' banks. These states' banks did all the banks did in this situation. They called their debtors in a heavily loaded land purchases. That, of course, these people were unable to pay and suddenly found that their land plummeted in value. Unemployment was rapid. The state banks that didn't collapse foreclosed on lots of the properties and handed them over to the National Bank. Deep as convenient. Although Monroe did little to address any of these issues, there is an argument that he was hamstrung as the real problem was happening with the state banks. The National Bank, as a federal institution, had already where they were afraid to concrete economic policies and centralize power into one's institution. Others could easily argue that his personal feelings about the constitutional federal powers might have taken a backseat to the plight of regular Americans. He failed to provide leadership at the moment when decisive government action might have been stabilized by the economy and migrating hardships. In 1821, Congress passed a law allowing people who were unable to pay the government for the land they bought to hang on to some of their land, even in default, and worked out repayment schedule. That helped some. Another help was that state banks basically printed more money and mostly inconvertible notes, meaning that it was not tied to an existing infrastructure supply of gold, silver. It held to back up the currency. Bitcoin. However, it happened. It was becoming over familiar patterns of boom and bust of banks internationally overextending themselves once every 25 years or so. Yeah, that cycle keeps fucking repeating.
It
And we are
does.
watching it on a death spiral right now,
Yep.
at least here in America.
And the only rescue they have for it is socialism.
Yep.
When the government just covers
Yep.
all debts, yeah. We're also seeing Monroe here doing something that we've seen other presidents do in our series of founding Feckheads, which is nothing. Some of the presidents felt it was their federal duty. It wasn't that they were lazy or stupid. They felt it was their federal duty to do nothing. They felt that if something was going to fail on its own, that was like part of the God's best plan or whatever. And it was very strange. Until, like, I don't know, man, until the riots start. Then you want the food riots, that's when you need to do something, right? Um, Monroe
Yeah.
may be best known, and by best known I mean I knew him best for this. Monroe may be best known for the Monroe Doctrine from his 1823 State of the Union address, which, despite its name, was mostly written by John Quincy Adams. At the time, it was felt that all of the US's foreign policy positions were being caused by rapacious actions of European powers in the Caribbean and Latin America. Around this time, the Latin American countries in particular were moving with purpose towards independence, as we covered in the case of Chile in our episode Operation Foobelt. We talked about Chile, and we'll be talking about other South American countries in the future. The important bit of this address he made says that the American continents, by the free and independent condition which they have assumed and maintain, are henceforth not to be considered as subjects for future colonization by any European powers, which is clear enough. This is a long ass address, right? So I'm just giving you the greatest hits. Another important bit says, we should consider any attempt on their part to extend their system to any portion of this hemisphere, literally he said this hemisphere, as dangerous to our peace and safety. Existing European colonies were magnanimously grandfathered into the doctrine, but any attempt to set up new colonies, or indeed interfere with the independence movements of Latin American or Caribbean countries, will be interpreted as the manifestation of an unfriendly disposition towards the United States. Right? Big words from a country with a tiny navy and whose army had been slashed by 50% due to defence cuts forced on Monroe by the Panic of 1819. The British had been pressuring the US to join them in a pact to deter the colonialism of all the European powers, including Russia, funnily enough, which was rapidly colonising Alaska at this time. Monroe insisted on staying neutral and hinted at nothing else in his speech. No one had to explain that the British Navy would happily enforce this new doctrine, but later the Americans would police it, as anyone listening to our podcast will know. This statement ended a US foreign policy based on choosing whether to support England or France, and began what we all know and love as US foreign policy. This was also the first time that the US openly claimed not just land for themselves, but an entire sphere of influence, meaning they claimed land that they had no intention of colonizing themselves. They just said South America, they weren't trying to invade it or anything, they were just saying this is now ours as it is. The feeling among Americans that they had an almost moral right, more than a legal right, to expand westward, or wherever they wanted, this was called manifest destiny. That kind of thinking would eventually result in Operation Condor in the 1970s, which we will definitely be talking about, where the CIA felt comfortable funding massive insurgency operations against democratically elected governments, which they felt were against American interests, which at the time meant going socialist. But this is the jib, and we don't want to give away any spoilers.
Yeah, and we'll definitely do more on Manifest Destiny and how all that
keep popping up
out, because that's
yeah,
it's a lot. Yeah, might have to do an episode on it, because it's to really see how it started and the way it was kind of forced. It's pretty interesting. It kind of plays. It is very much in line with what they did, the CIA and other things.
Is that Monrovia statue in
foreign policy? Yeah, I forgot to share that.
Show them the statue.
Yep.
That's in Liberia in Africa.
That's a prick right there.
Yeah. Mixed feelings, I think, in Liberia today.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Probably. Well, this was kind of a short one.
Yeah, despite the delays.
I think we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah. We did good.
Hopefully this sounds and looks better than what it is on our end, and we don't have to do this again.
We'll put it to the AI echo reducer.
Oh well.
I guess we'll see you guys in 2 weeks, and I don't know what
hopefully that works.
Going to be, but thanks for joining us, and we will see you soon.
Yeah, mystery abounds.
I'm sorry. I forgot I do that.